Greetings, fellow detectives. Wizard Kitten here, bringing you a new build in my series, Building Nancy Drew in The Sims 4. Today we are bringing you part 2 of 3 of the Golden Gardenia from Nancy Drew Message in a Haunted Mansion. This build was so massive and took so much time that I did have to break it up into 3 parts, so hopefully that's okay with you guys. But this is the second part, which is going to end up including most of the interior that we get to see in the game. So a lot of the spaces that we are familiar with in the game that we actually get kind of some screenshots in and get to explore a little bit will be furnished in this part. In part 1, we finished the exterior of the build, minus the landscaping that will be included in part 3, and the bedroom that Nancy stays in when she is at the Golden Gardenia, as well as Nancy's ensuite, because all of the bedrooms have ensuites. I just can't imagine going to like a bed and breakfast or a hotel and having to share a bathroom with other people, so I wanted to make extra sure that there were ensuites. Anyway, we are starting here with the dining room. So this is obviously the space where the guests would have their breakfast at the bed and breakfast. And I imagine that they would pretty regularly serve meals in this room. I think that they would serve more than just breakfast, honestly. I feel like they probably would have kind of a rotating menu of dinners or lunches. One of the bed and breakfasts that I went to, which is an amazing place, it had murder mystery dinners. So you could pay in advance to stay at the place if you wanted to, or you could just come for the murder mystery dinner, and they assigned you a character, and you got to kind of act it out and try to solve the mystery with your fellow dinner guests, most of whom were strangers that you hadn't met before. So it was really fun. And I know that Abby is very much into business practices that will draw in a lot of customers. They talk quite a bit in the game itself about how they want to make their bed and breakfast stand out, and there's even articles about how it's really imperative that you make your bed and breakfast stand out because there's so much competition. And if you want people to stay at your place, they're gonna need a draw. So they might do something interesting, and one of the things Abby tries out is like seances and connecting to the people who used to live in the house, like El Diablo and Lizzie Applegate. But who knows, maybe they might have really fun like murder mystery dinners, or maybe they have like ghost dinners where they do seances but they still have like a really nice meal, and it's just kind of Abby putting on a show. I could totally see her doing that. That would be right up Abby's alley. And I think it would be so fun to like try to cultivate a menu for a place like this while you're also trying to think of ways to make the dinners interesting. I just think that would be so fun. The dining room actually came together quite easily. I used a lot of things from the Realm of Magic pack, a lot of base game art, a lot of things from vampires. It's just very similar aesthetics in kind of like that Victorian style. We end up getting a lot of those kinds of things in base game, but you still, I still rely quite a bit on the Realm of Magic and the Vampires Games packs to really complete the aesthetic and get a lot of the finishing touches definitely are from those packs primarily. So now we're moving on to this downstairs hallway, which connects basically all of the main rooms. It connects the kitchen, it connects the butler's pantry, it connects the stairwell that goes down to the saloon, it connects the dining room, and it has the staircase that goes up to the second floor. And this room it's pretty incredible that even this hallway in the game, in Message in a Haunted Mansion, is still really beautiful. So I still used a lot of the furniture from that game for inspiration when decorating it, and then I just kind of expanded it based on filling in the space in a way that made it feel more complete. A lot of the times in these recreations, and it's just in video games in general, the footprint needs to be bigger so that the characters have room to maneuver around in. So like Nancy's not bumping into furniture all the time as she's trying to click through and move through the space, which means that big parts of the space end up looking kind of empty, which we'll see in the kind of sitting area, living room area that we work on a little bit later. But that's definitely a thing that I try to combat a little bit more in the game. I want to, in The Sims 4 at least, want things to feel more like a completed build. I enjoyed putting in the dumbwaiter, which it actually like plays a pretty important role in the mystery itself, so I definitely wanted to actually include the dumbwaiter. And now we're moving on to what might end up being my favorite room in the build, which is the saloon downstairs. It's one of my favorite places in the game itself too, just because like so much happens down there, it's so mysterious, and it definitely feels like the place that has the most authentic furniture. It feels like a lot of that furniture that was there was left behind, and it's the space that I imagine had the most life in it when this place was back in its heyday. So I had already put down a lot of tables and everything, and this organ down here, which is just kind of doubling as a piano. But we don't have a standard, like, standing piano. We only have grand pianos in The Sims 4, so the organ plays that role. But either way, I just had a lot of fun filling in this space with old artwork, really refurbishing the saloon so that this is a place that guests would really enjoy. Just like I was talking about how the dining room would maybe have to have potential draws for guests, I feel like the saloon would definitely be one of the draws for guests as well, even if they didn't do certain kinds of dinners. Just the fact that you could like come down here and get a drink and look at all of the historical artwork down here. Someone might be playing piano. It's just kind of cozy. Even though it's like really dark and dingy, it's still a cozy, fun little space. So I just love how the saloon turned out. It feels very much like the game, like Message in a Haunted Mansion, which makes me happy. I like when things get so close to the games that they feel like I'm actually there, kind of thing. And it would be so fun to fill this space up with a bunch of Sims and just have like a little party down here. The Golden Gardenia would actually be a great place for like wedding planning. I feel like you could have an excellent bachelor or bachelorette party down in the saloon. I feel like some of the suites in the bedrooms on the upstairs level would be perfect for preparing, be just a very romantic location. I do also love how this main entryway turned out. So right now we're just working on the pattern of the floor from the Golden Gardenia's main entrance area. And again, this is a 2-story entrance space, so it's very big, very bold, really expansive, and just gorgeous. I love the deep green wallpaper that the game has and that we end up using in this space as well. I just had to make sure that I could find the right green, which was surprisingly difficult. I had to search for a little while before I could find the right green, but I ended up going with this one, again from the Vampires game pack, which ended up working out great. I also don't know what it is with the early Nancy Drew games and insisting on putting green and red together as a color scheme. Like, I get that it's like bright, fun colors, but just in general, it's not really a color scheme that I see a lot in the world, and I don't know if it was a super popular color scheme back in the day, but it just screams Christmas to me. So it's always like kind of funny when I'm looking at these screenshots and I notice, oh, they had green walls and red curtain again. It's kind of like in Maddie Jensen's apartment, how her basic color scheme was green and red, which is just, they're very, they're not even really complementary colors. They're kind of, where are they on the color wheel in relation to each other? They're just not great together, I guess is what I'm saying. But overall, I think the aesthetic still works, and I think it still ends up looking very similar to the way it looks in the game. It's a little bit more compact, I think, but the space ends up working out okay. I just put these little end tables at the bottom of the stairs with a couple of random decorations. These benches in the corner, I had to overlap them a little bit, and you can kind of see them clipping, but that's what the benches look like. There's more of that L shape in the actual game. I love how this little seating area turned out over in this corner. Just the way the light looks in the screenshots, I think looks so pretty. So hopefully you guys like how that turned out. And then putting all of the portraits on the walls was super fun as well. That's just such a feature of this game that I remember so very clearly. It's just so fun to think about, like all the portraits on the walls and the very fun and iconic I see you moment. So trying to pick out portraits for that was definitely a good time. In the game, in the screenshots, this right or left hand side, this side with the grandfather clock where I ended up putting it, has ladders and like paint cloths. What are those called? Like cloths that you put down so you don't get paint on the floor and stuff. And that's just because the whole space is going through the renovation. But as I mentioned in the first part of this build little series, I wanted to do the golden gardenia as though it was completely renovated. They had finished the renovation process, everything was done, and now it was more complete. So there's not any boxes anywhere, there's not any ladders or paint chips or anything like that. So I enjoyed filling in the space with like complementary furniture to kind of convey what that hopefully would have looked like when things were done. I like how it looked. I think I'm very pleased overall with how this whole build came together. Again, this was a massive one. I can't even remember how many hours it took me, but even sped up as much as it is, I think it had to have been like 7 or 8 hours of building. It was a big one for sure, but the big ones definitely, you get a huge sense of accomplishment when you do finally finish these builds, especially if you're happy with how they turned out, and I did end up being pretty happy with these ones, so all is well. Now we're moving on to the living room area, or like the sitting room area, or the parlor. I guess there's a lot of different things that you could call this space, but in the build, it's basically a space with a bunch of couches. And this room ends up looking huge compared to how it looks in the game. Like, it is massive. So I end up putting more couches and chairs than we actually see in the game, but I still also include all of the seating, couches, chairs, everything that we see in the game, and then just add a couple extras in the same style. So we have these lovely base game couches here that are going to be pretty much throughout the space. I imagined that this would be a really popular room in the house for just relaxing, chilling out. You can read a book. I do end up putting like a little tea station in here too. So I imagine that in the afternoons they serve afternoon tea, and they put out like little pastries, scones, muffins, cookies, just kind of a little afternoon snack kind of thing. But of course you could get a tea at any time. I just love that idea of having a space where you could kind of escape and go to just hang out, be quiet, and since there is so many seating areas, so many little different seating spaces, there are a lot of options for where one could hang out in this area. So I had a lot of fun doing that. Every time I pause, I'm progressing my way through my walkthroughs for Message in a Haunted Mansion, trying to get different angles of the game so that I can kind of see different pictures that I need to include, or different furnishing items that need to be included, different spaces that need to be filled up. So over in this area is where Nancy can find a book. So I wanted to make sure that there was a seating area over there. And then this is a seating area where Nancy can actually find a box, a cardboard box of papers, basically outlining the history of this house. So this little seating area was super important as well. And then I'm just making sure to kind of fill in the space as much as possible at this point, because now I've pretty much got everything in that needs to be included. Once I finish this little area here, there's supposed to be a fire extinguisher in that cabinet right there, which refused to center the clock for some weird reason. But there's supposed to be a fire extinguisher in there, to which Nancy says, "Good to know it's here." This is true, Nancy. It is good to know where a fire extinguisher is, always, especially when you're in a super old house that's primarily designed with wooden accents. Probably important to know where the fire extinguisher is. We have this beautiful antique-looking fireplace. It actually looks very similar to the one in the game, so I had a lot of fun including that. I think the fireplaces in this build end up looking just so similar to the ones that we have in the game. Sometimes it's almost like, did The Sims get inspiration from Nancy Drew? Because every once in a while, there's an object that just looks perfect. Like, it's exactly what I need, and that's always fun. I do have all of the packs, so the fact that I can't always find something that's perfect definitely speaks volumes about the huge variety of things that we have in this game, and the huge lack of things that we have in this game. Like, we have so many wonderful items, and yet still, it can be very tricky to get a perfect replica. I tried to use similar end tables, similar styles of furniture throughout this room to try and keep everything cohesive. There is a little bit of wood tone mixing, which they're close, but they're definitely different wood tones from one another. But I think because the accents are spread throughout the room, hopefully everything kind of blends together. You guys will have to let me know what you think. And especially at the end of this video too, you'll have to let me know like what spaces in the Golden Gardenia would you be excited to hang out in? Where would you go in this building the most? Would you hang out in the saloon? Would you hang out in this sitting room area? Would you go to the library? Would you pull a Rose and hang out in the dining room and just be excited for all of the delicious meals that they're probably serving? I think I would definitely make the rounds. I would plan out my days to include all sorts of wonderful exploration in this fantastic house, while also including wonderful times for relaxation, like reading in this beautiful space. This desk over here is another example of something that I thought was super similar to what we have in the game, and I just love how perfect it looked. That was so fun. It's always tricky filling in the walls in these recreations for these ginormous builds because we don't have that many old-fashioned looking art pieces when it comes right down to it. It's almost, we have quite a few, but when you have to fill in so much wall space in an old style build, it just kind of shows how little we do actually have in comparison. So there are some repeats of wall pieces throughout the build. None of them repeat in the same room, but like there might be some of the same ones in the entryway, for example, that are also in this room. I tried to keep them pretty spread out though, so it's not super noticeable, but limitations. One must do what one must do when trying to recreate these ginormous, massive builds. I probably said ginormous so many times in this video, but it's a big build. This is, I think, the second really big kind of imposing build that I've done so far. The first one was Ramsey Hall from Warnings at Waverly Academy. And it's funny because the big imposing builds are some of the most important ones to me, because a lot of them come from the earlier classic games, which is really where I got my start with playing Nancy Drew. And it is my ultimate goal to do a build from every Nancy Drew game, and then probably additional builds from some other games, because there are some places that have multiple builds that I would like to try and tackle. But my first and ultimate goal is trying to take all of these big spaces, something from every single Nancy Drew game, and recreate it in The Sims 4. So that leaves a lot of very big, very imposing spaces, like Wickford Castle from Treasure in the Royal Tower, the Royal Palladium from the final scene is going to be a really big one. Castle Malloy would be a big one. What else? I mean, the museum from Secret of the Scarlet Hand, the museum from Labyrinth of Lies. There's just like lots of really, oh my gosh, Blackmore Manor. Oh, can't even think about doing Blackmore Manor. I'm gonna get sweaty and like stressed out because it's so big. It will happen eventually. It's just a matter of when I can work up the courage and have the time and the stamina and endurance to get through such a massive build. But anyway, enough of my my complaining, my stressing. This is the library space, which is another one of my favorite places in this game. The library is just so fun. I love books and I love libraries, and I really like the idea of exploring this space. And I love the idea of Rose and Abby kind of filling this entire room with books from that time period. So we have these big, beautiful, tall bookshelves that came with the Discover University pack. We have these really rich colored leather chairs. There's going to be a desk pretty soon here that stands in front of these really fun windows. And there's a gaming table over on the other side. So they have a mahjong table in the game where you can play mahjong, but we don't have that in The Sims. So it's currently just a card table, but you could also play Don't Wake the Llama at that table. So I think it's fun that there's actually a little space in this build where people could go and play some games. That would definitely be something that would be smart for Rose and Abby to include, would be like a stash of board games for people to play, because there are no TVs in this entire build. There is a computer here, this laptop in the library here. I included a laptop because Lewis Chandler, the antiques dealer who's helping them out with the renovation, excuse me, with the renovation, his laptop is in this room as well. So I figured they might as well keep a laptop. They probably need a computer, at least somewhere in this build. So that one I think would be one that guests could probably also use. The desk randomly disappeared and I couldn't figure out where on earth it went, so I put the desk back. It deleted itself, which is kind of weird. So now I believe we are moving on to Abby's bedroom. I think I wanted to do all of the spaces that we see in the game first, just while I had the walkthrough up and everything. It definitely makes it easier to, especially in like a linear sense, to try and go through and find everything. So I started with this room, the moon room, kind of furnishing it the way that Abby had it. But in my head, Rose and Abby don't really live permanently on the premises anymore now that the build is completely renovated. The Golden Gardenia is in good shape and they don't need to be there all of the time. I do include kind of like a manager suite on the first floor where they can stay if they need to. But I figured that Abby would take out some of the furniture that she had in this room, and then they would include just some new furniture to keep things a little bit more cohesive. So I definitely continue the feeling of this room, but I do change the color of like the desk, for example, so that it's not blue anymore. It's now black to go with the dresser and the bed and the nightstand and everything. And I don't furnish it as if Abby is living here. I furnish it as if a guest is living here. So, for example, I put these towels out on the dresser so that they have their towels ready to go. I put this fun little drink tray so that they can have like fancy sparkling water. But I do include a lot of the important things, like Abby's trunk is still here, so that blue trunk there. I include the painting of the woman because that painting is important. I include some of the bigger things too, like the wardrobe on the right-hand side and the bookshelf on the right-hand side. In the game, Abby has her radio on it, and I imagine she probably took that with her. And then I just use other things as well to kind of fill in that shelf. Because this room is kind of like the moon room or the celestial room, I wanted to really decorate it with lots of blues and purples and lots of Realm of Magic type items. So once I put in this bookshelf here, which came with the Eco Lifestyle expansion pack, and I absolutely love this bookcase, is one of my favorite things. I do still include a radio and then just little decorations that made me think of the color scheme and made me think of magic. So like this little measuring scale thing here, all of the paintings that we have from the Realm of Magic game pack. And all of the bedrooms on this upper level have kind of a color theme and kind of a cohesive decorating theme. So Nancy's room is the Chinese bedroom, and Abby's room is the moon room. And then when I work on the other guest suites as well, they also have certain color and design themes. So we're now working on the ensuite for Abby's bedroom. Again, we don't see that this room has an ensuite in the game, but I figured that it would be important for them to add ensuites for each of the bedrooms. So basically all of the same plumbing fixtures that Nancy has in her ensuite, but then just different colors and different decorations overall. So now what are we gonna do? I don't even remember what I had to do next. There's so many spaces. There end up being, I believe, 3 other bedroom suites. Yes, 3 other bedroom suites plus the guest suite on the bottom. The manager suite on the very bottom. I think that they would probably rent out the manager suite if they needed an extra space for people, but that one doesn't have an ensuite bathroom, so it might be one that they only rent out if people absolutely need it, like maybe someone is in town for business for one night and they don't necessarily need a separate bathroom. There is a public bathroom on the first floor as well that I add. So they could always use that to, like brush their teeth and get ready or something. But realistically, they could rent out 1, 2 to 5 2-person households at once because each of these rooms has a big double bed. This bed that I'm working, or this bedroom that I'm working on here, this suite, ends up being very purple in theme, kind of purples and browns, and it's kind of like the flower room. That's kind of the whole vibe I was going with for this one. So the flower room has lots of lilac-y colors, lots of lavender type colors, mixed with more natural colors like those deep browns that we see, and kind of like the creams. And then for the decorative items, I put lots of plants around, I put lots of flowers, and a lot of the artwork and sculptures that we see around the room is also very floral in design, including these beautiful rugs here, which are fantastic. I used basically the set from Vampires and the set from Discover University to furnish this room. You guys should let me know in the comments after you've seen all of the bedrooms which bedroom you would want to stay in. Would you want to stay in Nancy's room? Would you want to stay in the moon room? Would you want to stay in the flower room? And then there's 2 others that you will eventually see as well, although I'm not positive that you'll get to see them in this video. That might be in part 3. So maybe you'll have to let me know in part 3 after you've seen them all. Unless you're like, oh no, Nancy's room is definitely my vibe, I'm totally staying there. Abby's room, the flower room, is definitely my vibe, I'm obviously staying there. This room ended up being very big, so I had kind of a hard time trying to define the space in it, especially since it has kind of this weird hallway entrance where it gets steadily bigger. I use these room dividers to kind of help out with that, and I loved that they were brown and that they still had floral accents on them, so I thought that they were perfect for the flower room. I think I do end up just going with 1 because 2 felt a little bit too constricting. I still wanted it to feel kind of open and airy. It has more of a kind of like a feminine vibe to it. Not in its entirety, but just more in general. And then including a couple of things that could be used by Sims in this space. So like if you did decide to stay in this flower room, you would get certain amenities. So you would get this full-length mirror, you would get this cool seating area in here. There would be the bookshelf where you could read a bunch of things. There is I do end up including a chess table, so there's like games that you could play in this space as well. And I wanted each room to have kind of its own appeal so that you could really choose certain rooms based on what you like, but even if you wanted a certain room and couldn't get it because it was occupied, that each one would still have its own kind of charm and everything. So now we're seeing the floral I can talk, I swear. I've been doing it for 27 minutes now. The floral theme really coming together. So by putting in lots of vases, lots of flowers, artwork on the walls, I included this little drink cart. So I figured that would be kind of another amenity to this space as well. It's just like this fancy drink carts where you could order in. I feel like you probably could do that at this space. Like they would keep bottles of wine ready for you to order if you felt like it. And then I was just trying to figure out where to put the chess table, and it does end up looking a little bit cluttered over on this side of the room, but I kind of figured that was okay, just because the idea of having something to do was more important to me than having the space look empty, and also I would prefer it to look a little bit more cluttered anyway. That's just kind of my vibe. So hopefully you guys don't mind that. The little chess table tucked in there in the back for your Sims to enjoy. More purple accents, more flowers, adding in some towels, and sometimes I pretend that these towels are blankets too, so you could pretend that they're just extra blankets. And I think this bathroom ends up being the biggest bathroom out of all of them. They're all pretty similar in size, but I still do think that this one ends up being a little bit bigger because I'm able to include kind of another storage element in it. It also might just be because of where the door ends up being placed, but I'm just copying and pasting all of the plumbing fixtures from the other bathrooms, again, because they're just all the same, but then adding kind of the unique touch to each one. So this one, for example, just has like purple elements, a little bit of pinks, lots of nice floral and feminine vibes, and a curtain, because it's important to have a curtain in your bathroom. Or at least I believe it's important, maybe you don't. Totally up to you. So yeah, I end up putting in a little end table here just so there was more space filled in, and I imagine it would be good storage as well. Some little lotions and shampoos. Again, nice little amenities that hopefully Rose and Abby have thought of. I love the idea of owning a bed and breakfast, so those are little things that I really enjoy thinking of, that what would make the guest experience even more wonderful, like what would make it stand out to them. So I really had fun with that. This is easily the smallest bedroom out of all of them that can be rented out. Abby's bedroom is still pretty small, but this one is even smaller. So this one might be good for like a single sim who maybe is, again, in town for business and just staying a night, or somebody who's on their own little vacation and is staying a while. But you could still easily fit 2 sims in here. It would just be a little bit more cozy. For this one, the overlying theme is just kind of more like a sea kind of coloring, like seafoam greens, this light blue, a little bit of like gray accents as well that you can kind of see in the furnishing. The way that I did this was I basically used bedroom sets from all of the packs that have more Victorian elements. So Vampires have that, Discover University has that. I was going to say Realm of Magic has it, but they kind of don't. So I end up using the Discover University bed set quite a bit. Nancy's room is the only one that has a Realm of Magic bed, because that one just looks the most similar to the one that Nancy has in her room. But regardless, that's how I kind of developed the color scheme based around whatever set of bedroom furniture I ended up using. So again, this room has light blues, seafoam greens. It's just kind of like a natural kind of seascapey type room with grays. This one doesn't necessarily have a super cohesive theme in terms of like design style, but the colors I think came together quite nice. It also doesn't have an outside window, so I wanted it to still feel very bright, despite the fact that it's a very small enclosed room. And I think those colors help to accomplish that. So it's definitely a cozier, a little bit more private room, but I still like how it turned out. I still think it would be a lovely place to stay, even though it is a little bit smaller and a little bit more enclosed. It's not quite as grand as some of the others. But I think there's definitely validity to that kind of style as well. So now we're just adding on the finishing touches here, and we're coming up on the screenshots in just a little bit. Part 3 will be posting tomorrow. I do hope that you enjoyed this part, and if you did, please feel free to give this video a thumbs up. That kind of engagement really helps us find new fellow detectives to join our growing little community, so thank you so much for that. If you aren't subscribed already, please feel free to do so and hit that notification bell for more Nancy Drew and Sims content. I do a lot in the summer. I'm working on posting 3 videos every week, and then we stream together. So yeah, lots of fun. Thank you so much for watching, fellow detectives. I will see you soon.